please rise for the pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the meeting minutes from our last two meetings, the formal meeting and the special meeting, are on your desk and posted on the city website. The city treasurer's report is located in a binder at City Hall and also on the city website. Committee reports are on your desk. Communications. We have the first mayoral veto, and then we have the county planning board has responded as they are asked by code to the law that's being proposed about changing the rules of off-street parking, and their recommendation is that they find this proposed action has no significant countywide or inter-community impacts associated with it. So they say we can go ahead. Then you have the second mayoral veto, and then a letter from Basil Sagos, who is the commissioner of the DEC, about climate smart communities program. And I think will we be hearing more about that tonight? Rich? No? Okay, well. Okay, I don't see. Why don't we go right to before we get to the resolutions, go to the presentation of the Natural Resource Open Space Inventory. Jonathan, would you like to
Yes, I would.
speak to it? You all have a copy on your desks.
If anybody doesn't have a copy, they're right here. I want to start just briefly by laying out the sort of legal context of this, since you are the legislative body and you're going to have a decision to make fairly soon. There was a state law passed, I think in 1968, that enabled municipalities to create conservation advisory councils. And the state law charged CACs with maintaining an inventory and a map of the open and natural areas within the municipality. It also said that when the inventory is completed, it's presented to the local legislature to be accepted and approved, at which point the Common Council can transform the Conservation Advisory Council into a conservation board, which would be a regulatory board like the planning board or the zoning board, and would be empowered to review and make recommendations on applications pertaining to development and zoning issues and things like that. Hudson in 2014 passed its own local law establishing a CAC, and I just want to quote you a little bit. Actually, there were two laws. One established it and one defined its purpose. A few quotes from those laws just to give you context. It's critical, this is critical to a city required by its location to adapt to sea level rise. The purpose is to ensure wise use, enhancement, and protection of the city's profound natural resources and parks, to foster the evolution of a land ethic among the public, and to provide technical guidance and research on issues as broad as proper management of former landfills, flood stage monitoring, energy efficiency, ecosystem assessments, street tree pruning, stormwater remediation, environmental grant opportunities, and urban and park design. so it's pretty broad. Our CIC was finally formed in early 2015, so we're having our 4th anniversary right now. And the document you have in front of you is the result of the work that we've done over those 4 years. I just want to very broadly explain what the inventory is and what it isn't. What it is a body of baseline objective information to be incorporated into the city's planning and decision-making processes. The spine of it, the heart of it, is a set of maps, as you've seen, that depict different aspects of the natural and built environment. And they do this in a unified way. We didn't create this data, maps like this, data sets that we incorporated have existed in different places, but now for the first time, it's all gathered in one place, and as you can see, all the maps are based on the same base map, so it becomes very easy to sort of read them and understand them as different layers of information. The only exception to that is 2 much more highly detailed habitat maps of the North and South Bay that were done for us by Hudsonian. So there are the maps, and then there's a text that explains the data that's shown in the maps. And then the text also identifies what we felt were the most important issues and vulnerabilities facing the city, and our suggestions for further research and possible actions to be taken in response to those issues. And then lastly, the inventory at several points refers you to a document on our city webpage which has links to lots of our source documents and places to go for further information about any of the topics that are dealt with. So that's what the inventory is, basically. What it is not is a plan, but what it should do is inform planning here in the city. Decisions, for example, of the planning board, actions of the Department of Public Works. It also is a starting point for any new plans the city devises. For example, there's been a lot of conversation lately about updating the comprehensive plan, addressing the zoning codes. This document should be in part of those conversations from the start. In fact, our original intention was more ambitious than we were able to achieve. We really hoped to present not only the inventory, but to accompany it with a set of conservation planning guidelines. Reality intruded, we didn't get that far. That's on the CAC's list of things to do. And something else the inventory is not is detailed enough to answer every resource question or to detail every issue on any specific site in the city. In other words, the planning board, for example, should not refer to this document to find out the specific details of a particular property. On the other hand, the planning board should be guided by this document to know that there's a chance that certain properties do need to be investigated. And by understanding these maps and reviewing development proposals, for example, the planning board will have an easier time knowing whether, for example, an engineering study or an environmental impact study ought to be done. Something else that the inventory is a dynamic thing. The maps themselves in front of you are static because they're printed, but they exist in digital software that we have. They can be updated very easily, added to additional layers of data added to them. Actually, again, we were more ambitious than we were able to do. There are a number of things that we had identified as data sets to include that we weren't able to do. For example, a map of historic and cultural sites in the city, and a map of unoccupied and city-owned properties. Those, for example, would be awfully useful in discussing new parks, pedestrian connectivity, and places that new housing could go. So we didn't do those maps, but they can be done. So back to the legal matter. The CAC right now is discussing a resolution to present to you sometime in the next month or two. We are not asking to be transformed into a board for a lot of reasons, including the fact that we don't think yet another layer of regulation is what we really need around here. We will be asking in this resolution that comes to you, we'll be proposing rather a definition of city policy on when the inventory should be referenced and considered and by what city agencies. The CAC itself wants to continue in an advisory role to proceed to develop conservation planning guidelines that can be incorporated into any revised zoning or comprehensive plan. To complete the street and tree inventory that we did 95% of last summer, to do a sidewalk survey, those kinds of things. And the inventory itself actually help the city with grant applications. The fact that when we go now for a grant for streetscape improvements, we can say, and we have this document, we know what we have here. This is a big plus as far as grantors are concerned. So that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions. Or what we really wanted to do was give you the document and let you digest it, give you a month or two, and then come back with our proposal for how it should be formalized as city policy.
Council members, any questions at this point? A lot to absorb. I think we should first of all congratulate the CAC on producing a document this complex and as a group of volunteers. It's pretty impressive. I don't know if we need to discuss it tonight because it's all new to all of us, but yes.
Hi, O'Connor, First Ward. Without going into too much detail, since you said you don't want to discuss it, because I have a lot to discuss about this, but we learned today from the state, from the Hudson River Estuary Program grant coordinator, that, and you know this was a hard-won answer that we got, that the grant will now be, the city will be given its money that we spent and lost, but the council doesn't have to accept this at all or do anything. This presentation completes the grant process. So before you do anything further about this, I think that this is a very problematic document. I would even call it fraudulent in certain respects, that have the greatest economic impact on future decisions in the city. So please be very careful and know that you don't have to accept it, adopt it, or anything else. The grant is this evening now complete and we can be reimbursed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Will you discuss it next week or do anything with it at next week's meeting?
I don't think so. You're not ready to, I don't think we're doing anything till there's a resolution in play.
Thank you very much.
That would make sense to me.
Okay, let's start with our resolutions. First resolution is appointing commissioners of deeds. There's an introduction and a second. Come on. Second. Rob. Second resolution is to, apparently, we owe HCBPA some money towards the original Dunn warehouse feasibility study that was done a number of years ago. HTC, yes.
This is an outstanding bill.
An outstanding bill. I know, it's,
My understanding is that the grant that the city got for, I think this is Saratoga, maybe the name of the firm, to do a
Saratoga, yes.
feasibility study of the Dunn warehouse, and there was a 50% match from the city required by the grant. I think HDC put it up,
Put it up, right.
and they're looking, they were never paid the other
Their match.
50%.
Probably, it just, I don't know, maybe with the transition of losing Sheena, it just got
Oh,
lost
right.
in that.
So this was completed.
This just closes it out. Yeah. Do I have an introduction in a second? Or is Eileen? Second? Third resolution, we do this every year, excuse me, designating the Register Star as the official newspaper of the city. Any questions or? I have an introduction in a second, please. Rich? Oh, sure shot. Excuse me. A resolution to accept donations on behalf of the Hudson Fire Department dive team. Let's see, this is from there was a chicken barbecue at the Central Firehouse, and they raised $1,383. An introduction in a second. You look like you're ready.
I donated to the chicken barbecue, even though I've been vegetarian for over 20 years. So there you go.
Bird killer.
Please, no
No good
comments.
deed, but have to
No
punish.
good deed goes unpunished.
This is a resolution to transfer funds to the Department of Assessment. This was an emergency expense that came out of the mayor's budget to add to the assessment. And this reimburses the mayor's, I'm sorry. Yes, this
The mayor is moving.
Right.
moving.
and this is the reimbursement.
Doesn't-
No, I'm sorry,
No,
this is the
it's
actual pay.
business
This is
that
the
could move
pay.
it, yeah.
So it's already been done, now we have to pay for it. Can I have an introduction in a second? Eileen? Second? The next resolution is a resolution supporting the enactment of universal healthcare coverage system as proposed in the New York State Healthcare Act. This is the Healthcare for All Act that's currently being considered by the state. It's just showing our support for it, because if you read the documents, you can see how much we as a city would save if there was healthcare for all in New York State. This, of course, is just asking the state and to approve it. Do I have an introduction in a second? Calvin? Second? Rich? Okay. So there's a lot of supporting documents if you want to read that before the formal meeting, and we're going to vote on it. Next resolution is a resolution accepting the youth department donations from Linda Theis and Mount Pleasant Reformed Church. They have together donate $50 from Ms. Thice and $100 from the Mount Pleasant Reformed Church. Do I have an introduction and a second? Tiffany? Calvin? The next resolution is authorizing an amendment for the youth department personnel and maintenance of equipment. This resolution does two things. It provides money for the somebody who's hired late in the year to get his buyout, and the second part is to fix the roof and the electricity at the side room of the youth center, which is currently closed because it's a danger right now. It's probably even worse today with the rain. Any questions?
That was gonna be my question to Nick, how was it today?
Yeah, I'm sure it's still.
Because the room is closed, I haven't been in there today, but we have buckets under the spots where the leaks are. So when I get back, I'll check and I'll send you a text. But pretty much every time it rains, there's water coming in, and then for a few days afterwards, there'll still be water dripping in, because you can see the, I think attached to the resolution, there's some photos, and you can see that there's actually standing water almost at all times on the roof. And so if that standing water is above the cracks, then it'll just be seeping in.
And what was also discovered is that the electrical wiring is partially exposed, which of course makes it even more dangerous and in need of emergency maintenance. Excuse me, can I have an introduction in a second? Come on, and Tiffany.
Seems that the bid is rather low, considering it puts a lot of electric work in there.
It was actually began much lower, and this is, you want to speak to that, Nick?
We've only got 2 bids in, John. And I think that I actually saw before I left that we got one more. I was pushing everybody over the weekend to try to get them in by today, but I would like to reserve the right, and I'll email the council as soon as possible. If we get a more comprehensive bid and it ends up being more, I may raise that component of it. But if it does happen before, I guess, Finance Committee, which is probably the next place this will come up, I'll email all the council members. I think, I agree, John, that the electrical seemed very low to me.
Yeah.
Also, the mold and mildew is an if, that $5,000
Oh, I think
is
it's switch.
That, I couldn't get anybody to give a bid because we have no idea if there is any or what's under there. So if anybody has any ideas, Rich or anyone else that you think of what might be a more realistic number, I would be.
Oh, no, all I'm saying is that it's an if, so.
It's a very, yeah.
Yeah, it's conditional.
Let's make the 5.
Yeah.
All right.
The next resolution authorizes a transfer of funds to the attorney fees account. This is another sort of outstanding bill. When the city was in litigation with Calaruso, it turned out, surprisingly, that the HCDPA had to provide a flood plain permit, and they hired Dan Trzynski to do it, and this is just paying what's owed to him, which is $420. I have an introduction in a second. Alan? Second? Oh, is that your hand up, Cobb? Yeah. Okay. The next resolution supports the issuance of driver's license. It's another resolution asking the state to act, and that, in this case, it's to the issuance of driver's licenses to New York State residents regardless of immigration status. This was brought forth through the Housing and Transportation Committee and Alderman Barriga.
Yep, it was supported by the Housing and Transportation Committee to move forward to this council. Back in, I believe in August of 2016, the council passed a resolution supporting the license without, and the status of their immigration, and this is an update resolution. For example, what we discussed in the committee, within our Hudson City School District, as of now, you need an ID to enter the school, to whether your child is ill, to register your child, to bring in your child. You have to have some type of form of ID to even enter the school. And with this, in support of this resolution, that will help them. We have the sanctuary movement, Brian McCormick here, that can explain more to the council.
This is supporting documentation for the resolution.
Oh, okay.
For the council.
You pass that. Oh, I'm sorry.
So yes, my name is Brian McCormick. I'm the executive director of the Columbia County Sanctuary Movement. Immigrants in our community and throughout the state, in fact, over 750,000 of them do not have driver's licenses. Of course, one can imagine all the necessities of a driver's license, especially in a rural county like this. There's very little public transportation, so in order to get to your medical appointments, in order to get to school, in order to get to the hospital, to go to the grocery store, etc., people drive without licenses out of necessity. The bill is currently in the Assembly and the Senate as same as bills. We have enough committed votes to pass it in both the Assembly and the Senate. The Assembly leadership has determined that they will be bringing it to vote in the next few weeks, and the Senate leadership is working on that as well. I believe that the council or past councils here in Hudson have committed to supporting this legislation. I think we need a renewed commitment with the new legislation around this issue, as well as renewed and honestly old entrenched xenophobic and anti-immigrant sentiments within Columbia County, within Hudson, and within the state of New York. And I would encourage the council to do the right thing here. It's in the interest of the economy. $57 million in one-time revenue and $23, I believe, in annual revenue. It will allow immigrants to register their own vehicles, insure their own vehicles, and have a form of identification, which beyond driver's licenses can also allow immigrants to fully participate in their children's education.
Thank you. Any further conversation? Council first.
Rob, can I ask Brian a question?
Sure.
Is this because of the new enhanced driver's license that's going in effect in 2020?
So one of the reasons why there's a renewed resolution here is, yes, that's part of it. So the past resolution was in reference to 2016 legislation. That legislation actually had a component of it that had to devise a separate category of licenses. Now that New York State is becoming Real ID Act compliant, there's already a standard driver's license, which you'll see in your materials is differentiated from all of the other types of licenses or identification documents within the Real ID. And so the standard driver's license, which says right on the top corner, not for government use, basically it wouldn't allow you to vote, it wouldn't allow you to go into a federal building, it wouldn't allow you to board a plane. And so the legislation has been updated to reflect that.
Thank you.
Rich?
And from my understanding, this is just because I listen to NPR while baking cookies in the morning, is that this is not actually even, that this legislation actually existed in the state of New York back before 2001, and then Pataki, after 9/11, took it out. So this is just restoring what was already in place years ago.
Connecticut has it, right?
So in terms of policy, this isn't, and we'd be the 13th state after even Utah to pass this. So it's in terms of policy, it's nothing new for the state of New York.
Correct. Thank you.
Anyone else on the council?
Brian, what's the hang-up right now in committee with the Senate?
So it's in the Transportation Committee. Honestly, it's really just leadership deciding when they want to bring it to vote. Like I said, we are already confident and have counted the votes in the Senate. We know it will pass if the leadership decides to bring it to vote. There were some law enforcement concerns regarding access to information that were actually mostly misinformation in general. And so there has been some language in the legislation to clarify what that clause regarding privacy means. And so that's one of the reasons why the Assembly leadership has already conferenced it and committed to bring it to vote. And that clarification within the legislation will be introduced in the coming weeks.
Thank you.
But I will say also that it does not prevent law enforcement from running a standard query when they're pulling somebody over. So they'll still have the ability to look up somebody's driving history, their registration status, etc. The main privacy concerns are prohibiting third-party agencies from accessing the database of the DMV and running bulk searches on everybody who has a standard driver's license, for example, in order to try to target people for their immigration status.
Okay. The way I read it, and maybe it's changed, was it wasn't that, the language was for everyone, not just immigration status. I think that was the language that I saw, that it would prevent data from everyone, the way the language was written. So I think that was, the hang-up that I saw that they were working on, that it was like a kind of the way it was written, that it was for everyone, not, it wasn't isolated to anyone, any particular person.
That's correct. The legislation would apply to everybody without discrimination. However, the primary concern within writing the legislation was that a third party could access it and try to sort through it based on immigration status.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from council? Yes.
Thanks. I'm still thinking about this, how I feel about it, but I think the gentleman made some good arguments and points. I think it's totally unnecessary to suggest that your adversaries are xenophobic and prejudiced. It's not helpful, it's uncalled for. You don't need that in your argument. Thank you.
Just as a quick response, the opposition has threatened to hang, I will call ICE on speed dial outside of their DMVs. So
Am I xenophobic?
I never said you were.
Well, you kind of suggested that everybody did.
Attorney, this is done.
No, it's unnecessary.
Can we have an introduction in a second, please? Tiffany McCall. You were late, Trisha. Okay, the next resolution transfers lodging tax funds to the Common Council Fund for special events. So the Tourism Board, in their wisdom, has transferring $20,000 to the council, who will then have the Finance Committee award money for events that can be seen as part of the marketing.
It'll be more towards events similar to last year.
Similar to
The only other thing that the tourism board asked for is that the groups that do apply submit a marketing plan, to the
to
tourist.
stick to the letter of the law.
Right. Thank you. And because these funds are not in the current budget for this year, I think that would be just like one, if this goes through, then we'll be looking at next month in the Finance Committee, which the Finance Committee did last year. And we're probably just like a month or two maybe behind where we were last year. But the funds will be restored so that the groups can apply, and also there'll be no conflict of interest with any groups that are on.
Because some of the people on the tourism board are potential applicants. Kind of introduction in a second, or is there more comments or questions? Can I have an introduction in a second, please? Rich and Eileen. The next resolution, after much looking around for a good software to help us with the lodging tax. Did you find this, Rich, or Heather, I guess, came up with this? And there's supporting document behind it. It's much cheaper than the ones we've been looking at. And this will make it much easier to account for the lodging tax, to take in the tax and provide the details. Any questions? Can I have an introduction in a second, please? John and Rich. Okay, and our last resolution is another, dare I say, shouldn't call it symbolic, but a resolution, again, asking the state to act. In a way, I might add that the city has already decided to act based on our last meeting with the chief. What do we call that group? Come on, the sanctuary, I forget what they.
I don't know if we have an official.
But it was the group that met with the, with Brian and the representatives of the sanctuary, local sanctuary movement. And this is to get the governor to sign the Protect Our Courts Act, which the chief, I believe from that meeting, Brian, already said he has enacted in our,
Yeah, it'll go into policy.
it's already the policy here.
So basically what this is to say that ICE officers cannot make an arrest in the courts, and this is to basically help people come in and answer for either the crimes or if they're victims. Like 1/3 of domestic violence victims are not showing up to court to report that they've been abused because of fear of deportation or taken by ICE. We've actually had 10 incidents in the city of Hudson. 4 or 5 of them have been taken by ICE. So we don't want, people not coming to court because of fear of ICE.
Any questions from the council? Do you want to distribute it, supporting documents? Sure, go ahead.
I'm ready this time.
Is this something to do with the police committee?
Yeah, I'm actually asking, since we had that previous meeting and the chief has already been briefed on this, if we can forego the police committee and vote for it too.
Oh, right, that's in, well, okay, sure. So by hand, I would need
Rob,
a vote putting this forward. We need 2/3. Everybody in favor of putting this forward without going through committee, raise your hand, please. That's enough. So we can vote on it and introduce it and get a second tonight. Do I have an introduction, Tiffany, or is that a question?
Introduction.
Okay, and a second? Calvin. Okay. So with both of these, actually with all 3 of the resolutions that we're sending to the state, before our next meeting, read the supporting documents so you can be, informed about why we're doing it. Let's see. Oh, and lastly, just to remind you, on your desk is the proposed local law, which we may be putting forward about at our next meeting, and that is to alter the off-street parking regulations. Any old business that the council would like to talk about? Any new business that the council would like to talk about? Rich.
One announcement, this Sunday, the Friends of the Hudson City Cemetery is doing a picnic in the cemetery from noon to 4 o'clock. So if you're interested, press releases are going to go out tomorrow, but we're doing a picnic on this coming Sunday. Bring food for yourself.
Come on.
2 announcements. This Thursday from noon to 5, Promise Neighborhood will be having our 7th annual community cleanup. It'll be starting at Promenade Hill, and we hope to see everybody come up. And also, I want to ask if the council can recognize a young man here who was just announced as salutatorian for the Hudson City School District. Congratulations to him.
Those of us who know Ash know that he's a very active participant in Project Unite's student government program. So congratulations. Anything else from the council? Trisha?
Yeah, I just want to ask about recent assessment, the grievance, if anybody need any help. Feel free to please contact me or Supervisor Linda Masman and who will help you guys. Thank you.
There's lots of advice both on the city's website. I know Kamal has advice on his website. Rob has advice on one of his websites. Is it your personal website, Rob, or
My Facebook page.
your Facebook page? Sorry. For people who need to know how to get through the process. If there's no more comments from the council, the public. Yes.
Thank you. Last week, there was somebody laid a sidewalk down at the waterfront. I don't want to say who, because I have no problem with the owners, but we need the code applied evenly here. So I recommended a code change, and I wondered, actually more important than that, this weekend I went down, I measured the heck out of it with all the angles, the meets and bounds, and part of the work was done on city property because a portion was added when it was an industrial, zoned industrially, onto the Ferry Street portion of city property. So, we can't have that. Can we make the code change? And if you liked the idea, what can I do next?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, what can I do next is the...
Did you send me an email with all that factual information?
Well, I wouldn't call it factual. I mean, I went down and measured it all. I'm just a citizen. Somebody has to look into that, or I have to convince them or something. But we could avoid so many problems if we would just add those words. There are no minor actions in the core riverfront district. That would take care of a lot of problems, folks. I mean, the bulkhead, the East Causeway, all that stuff wouldn't have happened. Thank you.
You're welcome. And that, John, for the reading night.
That'd be pretty easy.
Okay. Peter, do you have something you want to say?
Yes, Peter Frank, First Ward. I'm just curious what the status is of the city-sponsored DRI projects. I know that there was an organization that's a planning office that's running them for the city, but we haven't heard about it in a while, and I'm just wondering what the timeline is and at what point the public will hear more about what the plans are, particularly for the complete streets aspect of it, which is the largest piece of the DRI.
Yeah, we're meeting again tomorrow. You meet here. I mean, it's not a convenient time. It's at 2:30 on Tuesday. There is at present, we're developing a timeline for the 5 various projects. And so far it's been established that the first 2 projects and the most, 2 that we think can be done the most quickly are the Dunn warehouse restoration and Promenade Park design. So those are the 2 highest priorities for various reasons. The Dunn is basically an emergency, can't allow it to deteriorate further. The other 3, well, the Fagari project isn't very well funded to begin with, so we're not even sure where that's going to go. But the other 2 are both sort of in the DRI district, the complete streets and the 2nd Street steps. We're still trying to develop a plan for that. We might have an RFQ coming out within a week in time for the DPW committee to go through it. And then it'll come to the full council next meeting, our formal meeting. And that should get some of the projects actually underway. So that's about all I think I can report on. It goes relatively slowly. The state is very slow to get back to us when we have questions, but it's moving. Whereas Galileo allegedly said, but it moves. Yes?
About Fergary, you said you don't know where it goes. You mean in the sequence of things, or?
Yes.
Okay, and just to remind you.
Because it's very underfunded for whatever it is.
Right, but just to remind you, a lot of that money goes to removing half the shacks. So, a park is invented like that.
Yeah, well, if it can indeed.
Do sponsors get to speak to anyone? When does that happen, when we get to talk to people?
Every project will have a project manager, and there will be community participation in every single project. That's definitely part of every RFP, every RFQ. None of these things will be done in the dark.
I don't hear Fergary being phased out, do I?
No, absolutely
Okay,
not.
okay,
It's
thank you.
just that as we looked at it, we're starting to realize that $150,000 doesn't go very far with whatever it is we do with it.
We've already budgeted it, so.
What do you mean we've already budgeted? I don't understand what you mean by that.
Well, we put in a budget to the state. All that money's spent and accounted for. The 150 grand is accounted for. Each thing that has to be done.
Really? I'm not sure that's
What? Accurate, I wrote it. I'll send it to you.
What do you, Carol, did you?
There was a budget that was included with the
Okay.
application.
It was the only way to,
Okay.
yeah.
And what was that budget towards?
Well, demolition.
Demolition?
Demolition of some mitigation.
Right, and who came up with that figure?
It was Sheena.
Okay.
Yeah. We want to put a roof on one, and we have to put some sonotubes under others. That's it.
Okay, well, so far in the discussions, the perception has been that 150 won't accomplish that, but we'll see.
Well, I
Let's
hope they
start-
talk to us.
Huh?
I hope they talk to us.
Sure, of course, that's not even an issue. Of course, everybody it'll be wide open.
If they're scratching their heads, I'm available.
Nobody's scratching their head. We do have, we've, for a while now, we've had an overall project manager
Yeah.
who was basically doing the paperwork on all 5 projects. Each project will have an individual project manager. That project manager will hire designers, the people who will actually see the project through, project managers. So, it's a process.
If you think I should resend the budget, just tell me.
We have
Thank you.
it. Yes, Tiffany.
Just letting the public know, this Tuesday, May 21st, the Hudson City School District School Budget and Board of Education is having an election from 12 to noon. Starting from 12 noon to 9 p.m. And I have flyers, if anybody want to grab some before you leave. For you all.
Yes, Nick.
I just want to let everyone know that this Saturday is the 36th annual fishing derby at Oakdale Park, and open to the public, obviously. It's always a fun event. And if anyone knows of youth who do not have a family member to take them or fishing equipment, please forward that info along to the youth department. And our new program is to support kids who don't have that access and bring them fishing rods, the whole 9 yards. So send their names our way.
Anyone else?
I have something.
Yes.
I'm Bernadette Moore, I'm a resident of Hudson. On this Thursday, there's a mayoral debate at the Montgomery C. Smith School. It begins at 6 o'clock. I invite everybody to come. I will tell you, my husband Randall Martin and his team have put this together. We've gotten a tremendous, tremendous response. So get there on time if you want to see it. Thank you.
I'll be there.
Anyone else? Motion to adjourn? Second? All in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?